Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Fair Life. Hey, to Kathy and Kurt and Jan. Whew, I know I started on time tonight. Very unlike me, but I try. I'm trying to get better at that, and I'm still going to keep going where I start the show about a minute early, and just for the pre-show at least, and then I start right on time around 7. That's the gist. I'm working on it, so that's the strategy. And hey, Alicia, thanks for joining, and Lisa, awesome. Yeah, wow, it has been another crazy week. I, of course, have been packing like crazy for two reasons. One, of course, because I'm moving and leaving Austin in a month. And yeah, going to be on the road barred. So that will be crazy. But then I'm also heading out tomorrow for Gen Con. So I'll be at Gen Con for the next week, and it will be, very different than Faire, but also kind of not in the same time. It's strange how those two things aren't exactly as different as maybe they should be. Oh, and Laisha's on the phone again? Okay. Um, never good. Yeah, I know it. That is one of the things I'm going to have to face on the road. And this is what Alicia's going through, having to get everything organized and kind of have a portable setup. Luckily, I've been working on that feverishly for the last couple of years. And I think I'm in a good spot to do that. We'll see. No pressure, right? But that's kind of where we are. I had a fleeting thought about canceling the show tonight because I'm still packing and getting everything ready, and I'm leaving really early, really early tomorrow. But no, I've canceled on y'all so much this year already, more than I've wanted to by far. So I'm trying to push it and get as many shows in this year as I can. We'll see. Right. That's always the other tough one. How long do you use electronics? And it's kind of like a car, because some people, they just think, well, it's better just to get a new car every couple of years, or every year sometimes. And others are like, no, I'm going to get my money's worth, and I'm going to drive that car until it dies. And it's really, I get both sides of that. I mean, I think it's one of those things. It just depends on what you can do financially and where your interests lie. Because with older systems and older cars, they need a little TLC. They need to be taken care of, and some serious upkeep to make sure that they can still function after several years, because they're not really designed to last that long sometimes. But yeah, that is kind of that is the trick for sure. I did run into something earlier in the week, last week, and it kind of stood out. So, yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you kind of what that was. I don't know. Maybe you've seen this pop up as a meme on Facebook. I've seen it over the last several years. Not always like this. It sometimes would come up with a different picture and different type of text, but this is the gist. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology offers a pirate certificate to students who complete the archery, sailing, fencing, and pistol or rifle shooting courses. Yeah. Have any of y'all seen this? I mean, is it just me? Because I've been seeing it for the last several years at least. And it just kind of had the ring of being fake, like not like maybe a student organization did it, and calling it an MIT offering just was disingenuous at best. I know, right? Archery? Yeah, I know. That was kind of like, and is it even real? Is it just one of those things an AI wrote that they're just trying to get clicks? Is it clickbait? Okay, you've seen it? Okay. Well, no, I'm saying it. I have seen it for years, but I've always disregarded it, and I finally, okay, now this is, if you want to get my attention, take 5 years of shoving things in my face, and eventually I'll take notice. that's how dense Andrew can be. So now you know. But no, I was just, I, for me, when I look at something and I say, is this for real? I, of course, try to research it. So I did. I researched it. So, yeah, right. Sarita, I didn't know if it was either. Yeah, and Lisa, sometimes I have seen fencing and even archery from college, sure, but the certificate thing seemed a little odd, and MIT isn't exactly known for this kind of thing. So yeah. And hey, Nancy, thanks for joining. So yeah, I just looked it up and I thought, okay, well, let's do a little research because that's one of my strengths. So let's see. So I jumped over, and of course, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, founded in 1861 as a private research university in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's played a significant role in the development in many areas of modern technology and science. So, I mean, that's true. How much of a role? Well, I was wondering how accurate that belief was. So I looked it up, and I think the best way to phrase it is, well, so far there have been 12 people who've landed on the moon. 4 of them went to MIT. So yeah, they're pretty involved with that, with the sciences and space and all of that. Now, you notice 1861, my first impression or gut instinct was that, oh, was MIT a reaction to the Civil War? I mean, wanting to have more science and technology so the North could win? Was that actually a conscious thing? I didn't even know MIT was created that late. So yeah, I found that kind of interesting. But no, just a coincidence. It was chartered a couple of days before the first battle of the Civil War, and talked about several years before that. So no, just the timing and all of that. So I found that interesting. And hey, Harvey, 9 college hours in science fiction. Well, that's nothing to be ashamed of at all. And hey, Greg, thanks for joining. Yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of famous alumni. I didn't want to get into all of that because that's a long list. And oh, okay. Well, yeah, some of you are familiar then. Well, one thing I didn't know, and which I found this was kind of interesting, is that it's considered a science school, but it has changed a little bit over time. Apparently in the 1960s and 70s, the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences kind of had some development at MIT, mainly because of some presidents that were oriented towards that. And in 76, it was named a Sea Grant College. That's a program of NOAA. NOAA is where a lot of us get our weather information. And that supported its programs in oceanography and marine science. Oceanography, marine science, sailing, pirates. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe there is something to this. And I also found out something else. Now, this is weird, that all students at MIT are required to complete a swimming test. So if you graduate MIT, you know how to swim. Just guaranteed. That didn't have that at the University of Texas at Austin. I was kind of like, that's weird. Okay. And also, non-varsity athletes must take 4 quarters, or 8 points as they call it, of physical education classes. So 4 classes. And of course, that certificate was for 4 courses in archery, pistol shooting, sailing, and fencing. So this is sounding plausible. So I did a little more research, and guess what? It's actually real. It is real. They do give this out. This is from the Physical Education Department at MIT. This started in the fall semester of 2011. What they did, they give out these certificates, a pirate certification, to any student, undergraduate or graduate, who has successfully completed courses in archery, fencing, pistol or rifle shooting, and sailing. And I was, yeah, Yeah, definitely interesting. I was really surprised by that this is a real thing given by the department. Well, it's the phys ed department at MIT, but it is a department at MIT. And if for those of you on phones who can't read this, it says this document certifies that the below mentioned salty dog has fulfilled the Physical Education General Institute requirement of completing archery, fencing, pistol, and sailing, therefore is no longer a lily-livered landlubber, and so MIT Physical Education confers upon this student the pirate certificate with all its privileges and obligations given at the Swashbuckling Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Ahoy, avast, and finally R. Wow. Wow. Yeah, Master and Blunderbuss. I love that's a good one. That's just I just found that hilarious. I don't know. I did a little more digging and found that apparently a student focus group in 2010, was giving suggestions to the administration about different topics and, hey, we should do this, we should do that. And they take those seriously sometimes, so that's good. And one of the things they recommended was that if you take those four, you should get a pirate certificate. And apparently the administration thought that was a good idea. And it's turned into a great kind of promotional tool to try to get support. They said that the classes fill up really quick. So it's actually a challenge to complete all four of those because it's hard to get the classes. Everybody wants them. And it's become kind of a thing of pride. And because of that, they usually award about 50 of these per year. That's about it. And they do it a few times each year during the year. So like 10, 15 at a time kind of thing. And when they present them, the students normally come up and are dressed in pirate garb to receive them. So yeah, I know it's just kind of a nice little bit of a nice little bit of Faire at MIT in my mind. That's kind of why I jumped on this, because I just thought it was kind of funny. I don't know, maybe not that interesting for everybody, but sometimes I see those memes and most of them I think are just total junk and clickbait. But every once in a while I kind of get curious, and that one seemed apropos to Ren Fairs, a little bit tangential at least. So okay, so you knew about this. Well, thanks for telling me. That's how it works. Yeah, I mean you're not wrong, but it is a little different. Right. They're not known for their sense of humor at all. Yeah, uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's a little crazy. Oh man. No, yeah, it's weird because I'm thinking about, pirates and everything, and of course I'm going to Gen Con, and there's going to be lots of people dressed as pirates at Gen Con. And there's going to be pirate-themed games and booths with piratey garb. And so, yeah. That's, okay, you're not wrong. I didn't warn you about that. But this was kind of a last-minute drop. So, to be fair, very much random kind of, oh, I'm curious kind of thing. But no, I mean, it's kind of interesting that how conventions are very much like Faire. I mean, at this point in time, I think there's less difference between conventions and Faire than there ever has been, by far. It's kind of crazy. Even compared to 5 years ago, they are so much more alike. The differences are starting to become hard to see. So yeah. I understand. And yes, always good to get your pirate lingo in. Really? An epi and a foil. Okay, so you worked on fencing apparently, Lisa. Yeah. I took a few fencing classes in college, but just a couple. It was for an acting thing. So yeah, it was fun, but I didn't delve as much as I kind of wish I had now. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting how little there is. And so it kind of brought me, of course, to the concept of conventions and Ren fairs are kind of the same thing. I mean, here, this is how I would phrase it. Originally, conventions were more about the fandom, while Ren fairs were more about the history. But now, conventions are more about the history of the fandom, while Ren fairs are more about the fandom of the history. I mean, it's kind of a weird truth. Either way, there's a lot of fandom and a bit of history with both, and it's a strange concept. So yeah, I don't know. So I immediately went to 7 reasons, and I thought, okay, well, let's do 7 reasons conventions and Ren fairs are more alike than they've ever been. Because, well, I mean, yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on as to the similarities between cons and fairs and how much they've crossed paths? I mean, it's really, they're really, I don't think there's near as much difference. It's kind of weird and scary now. Well, that's true. Most aren't. That tends to always be one of the gists that, because cons kind of started in the late 1930s. Consistently when they were consistent. They started in the late 1930s. Of course, they were literary cons then, all about sci-fi books. Then the 50s kind of changed that a little bit, changed with TV and movies and that whole, more of a fandom to it of pop culture aspect that changed it a little bit. And they kind of hit their stride in the 60s, which is about the same time Ren fairs started. Now, of course, you're right, Kurt, fairs are not air conditioned. Cons are usually indoors, fairs are outdoors. Yes, and a lot of people do wear Ren garb at cons now. They didn't used to, but it is very common now. Very common. I think as far as fairs go, it all kind of started in the 1980s, is how I understand it, that the whole people started coming to Faire dressed up as Conan the Barbarian. And, dressing up as Fae and fairies and trolls and ogres and goblins and all of that people started wearing that as performers and having that type of community, the mythical community of history. And that was, it was an interesting route to go. And I don't know, I mean, some people didn't like it. Then you had, then when I started going to fairs, I remember when kilts started making an appearance. Bravehearts came out, and Riverdance was big, and Inyo was popular in the indie music scene. And kilts started becoming a huge deal at Faire, where they didn't used to be when I first started going to Faire as a kid in the early 90s. Then, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and pirates were big. And everybody was dressing as Jack Sparrow or other pirates. And then, of course, Vikings. And then, of course, you get the whole influence of other fantasy, like Harry Potter. And even more Doctor Who. Sure, in the 80s, you'd occasionally see somebody wearing an old Tom Baker kind of scarf. But most people didn't even know what that was. And you'd always see people dressed up as Monty Python, the Holy Grail characters, clopping around with coconuts, and sometimes the Princess Bride, and all of that kind of thing. Oh, I'm with you there. Those Earthwalker boots are good. And yeah, a convention like a Ren Fair is kind of interesting too. I mean, people started wearing convention garb at Faire. So then the reverse started happening too. People would wear Ren Fair garb at conventions. I mean, well, here, you'd see at the old classic view, I think I have a picture. Yeah, here you go. Is people going to Ren Fair and wearing Star Trek uniforms and going around the tricorder and saying, hey, we're studying this primitive life forms on this planet, and doing that. That was always the joke that would go around in the 1980s and 90s. And a lot of the performers at Faire hated it. Some didn't and just took it in stride and had fun with it, but it was considered kind of a negative in performance circles, and to some people who did fairs as well. But it did kind of start that crossover, that acceptance that takes sometimes a generation to achieve. Yeah, I mean, historical movies tend to be faux history anyway, so having flexibility didn't seem that crazy. So yeah, anyway, let's jump over into 7 reasons. Ooh. Okay, so my 7 reasons why conventions and Ren fairs are more alike than they've ever been. So number 7. If I hurry, I might be able to get through this before it gets too late. Here we go. Patrons that go to one often go to another. It's a similar demographic. People who love history aren't much different than the obsessed fans of pop culture. It's just a different obsession, and they tend to appreciate both. So you'll get people that will go to both, and garb is expensive, so you'll make choices. And sometimes you'll wear your Ren Fair garb at the convention, and sometimes you'll wear your convention garb at a Ren Fair, and because you like wearing garb. So yeah. Well, what is too late? Considering I'm waking up at 5:15 a.m. and getting on the road at 6 a.m. Yeah, almost anything is too late. So yeah, A fair. I like that. Thank you. But yeah, no, I mean, it is. Yeah, I kind of just get it. The patrons, there's a lot of crossover, so it kind of makes sense. Similar demographic. Well, yes, you always have to have the classic responses. Yes. So yeah, number 6, merchants doing both events. Now, when I first started doing conventions, there was a little crossover, but most of the merchants of the conventions were, merchants who dealt in games or dice or sci-fi books, or the things you wouldn't usually sell at Faire. Of course, back then you didn't sell role-playing games at Faire. That was not normally done. But that has changed too. Now you have gaming booths at fairs as well. But yeah, it's started to make that transition. I mean, I remember at conventions early on, they didn't have anybody selling kilts, for instance. And then gradually that changed, and now you have multiple booths selling kilts. I think the Utilikilt was the first one I saw over there, and then others jumped on and saw how well they were doing. And I think the merchants kind of looked at it as, how much money are you making? Okay, yeah, maybe I could do that. I mean, it's tough because especially when you're a merchant at a convention, you normally have a certain trend of, I'm doing this convention and this convention and this convention. And when you're at a fair, you tend to do block booking where, okay, I'm going to be doing this fair for 2 months, and then I'm doing this fair for 2 months, and fitting a convention in there isn't very practical. But yeah, some of the successful merchants, I think, have made that transition. It's kind of interesting. And, you're right, and I was just about to talk about that. Many performers do both events. Now, that's a little weird because, well, when I first started doing fairs, originally I expected to do very traditional music. And I was quickly schooled in that, where, yeah, that's not going to go over very well. And I just went with the theme and just started having fun and coming up with stuff. But some parody music, some traditional music, some semi-traditional music, a little bit of everything. And very quickly, my old bandmate and I, we put out a CD of Tolkien-inspired music. And it did we put it out online, and it did very well. I think we were one of the first groups to put out a Tolkien themed CD online, and it did very well. And conventions started contacting us because normally they weren't interested in Ren Fair groups. They were interested in filk groups, but we kind of had a weird crossover because we did a few songs like I've Had a Million Ducats that were parody songs that worked. And then we had the Tolkien music. And with that, it kind of like, oh, we had that crossover. So we got into Dragon Con. We were one of the first groups. I mean, there weren't many groups that did Dragon Con back then, consistently anyway. And we kind of got in at a great time. I think if we tried to get in 4 or 8 years later, we might have had trouble getting in. I don't know if we could have. It got a lot harder. So we just, once again, it's the timing. It's the old saying, there's 3 ways to succeed in the business. Be first, be better, or cheat. And in that instance, I think we were first and tried to be better. I don't know about that, but we tried. But yeah, it is kind of weird. It's kind of been more of a shift where Ren Fair groups do more filk now than they used to, and convention groups do more fair music than they used to. And they call it, they're bards, and they do like, it's more like Dungeons & Dragons bards, but it's the type of stuff you do at a fair. And they've made that crossover. I know, right? I try not to do that. That's never good. If you can avoid it, yeah. You don't like to, it's never a good thing. And it will come back and hurt you if you're not careful. Number 4, indoor fairs. And that's what Kurt was mentioning earlier. Yeah, it's been interesting. They started doing indoor fairs because of the weather or the climate, and sort of like conventions, especially in the north where it gets really cold, and they have other fairs going on nearby in the spring and in the fall, and you don't want to compete with them. So you either go in the hottest part of the summer or you go in the coldest part of winter. And in some of those states, that lasts for several months. So it is common to have these events in, small little event centers that you have, event venues, that you can have these get-togethers or events or with booths and do all of that indoors. And I've seen it started to pop up a lot more in northern states over the last few years, and they seem to be continuing it. So we'll see if that trend continues, but it's becoming more of a thing. So I always think back to the Castle of Muskogee Fair. One of the things they did that was very revolutionary at the time, this goes back to the 90s, was they don't call themselves the Castle of Muskogee anymore, but they built this event center and made the outside kind of look like a castle. I mean, it's very faux, but it kind of looked like a castle. And then they started the Ren Fair around it. But it was an event center. I mean, they had a pub in there inside the building, and a lot of other rooms. And I think they had a lot of local events were held there in Muskogee, from Muskogee and around the area throughout the year. And that was the idea. They'd be able to have events there, but they also have an air-conditioned space during fair. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of been an interesting progression, I think. They didn't build it. Well, I wasn't there the first year. It was there, I think my first year there was 2000. And, oh, okay. Well, they modified a building that existed there. That's fine. Anyway, it was their idea to do the castle part. But yeah, it was an interesting concept. But modified, built. I mean, same difference in the what I was talking about. So yeah, number 3, history versus fandom. Well, it's kind of interesting because I think that, like I said, history, they've kind of turned history into a type of fandom these days. It's less academic and more fun. I mean, the memes kind of are a good example of that. But in general, I mean, I think alt history is a good example of that too. Like what you have, The Man in the High Castle and All for Mankind, For All Mankind, and Black Mirror, and shows like that really go for the alt history type thing in some way and have made it really common to think about it and make it more of a fandom. I mean, alt history has been around for a long time, but it's kind of had its peaks and valleys of popularity. Yeah, steampunk is another good example, very alt history, and that's been kind of turned into a norm, very much so. A little crazy that way. Honestly, I think one of the first shows to kind of push that among sci-fi nerds, the alt history thing, was probably Sliders in the 90s. Everybody was shocked how popular that show was. It lasted for a long time and it was crazy popular. And it wasn't that great, but, I mean, some of the acting was okay, but the concept was what worked. You just constantly go to an alternate universe every episode and see this is how life could be. And it was very interesting and enticing to people. So, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, certainly. There was a lot of charm. I'm not saying it was a bad show, but it was not, it wasn't high art. It was a fun show. They didn't take it too seriously, but, well, in the early episodes, they kind of did. They actually tried to take it very seriously. They took it less seriously later on. But yeah. Well, before he was Gimli, yes, you did. Sunrise Davies, yeah, sure. Okay, and yeah, I mean, I totally see where you're coming from, and that's kind of was my point. It fascinated people because of those infinite possibilities, and it happened every episode. They completely changed everything. It was like a rehash. Like, this is the same. I mean, this is the same place, the same city, in a different universe every show. So it was really fascinating. And every once in a while they'd do a show that was like they had trouble determining at first whether it was their original world or not, because it was so close. I mean, it really had some interesting possibilities. I mean, yeah. But yes, they really, it kind of fell off a bit later episodes, let's be honest on that. But it was, I think the idea and the concept and some of the acting, like I said, was pretty good. So yeah. Oh yeah, great cast. That's kind of what I mean. You had some good character actors. I mean, later on, some people like Kari Werher, let's be honest, not the best actor. Did you see Beastmaster 2? Just saying. So yeah, not the best. So yeah, I think history versus fandom, always an interesting concept. Let's go ahead and jump to number 2. SCA having a presence at conventions. That was kind of weird to see. And the first convention I ever went to, the SCA had a booth there. And it was really surprising. At first, I didn't know what to make of it. But gradually, I started to realize, the SCA, that's what they do at fairs as well. They have a booth, and they're just trying to get members to their organization. That's really it. They're just trying to promote their organization. And at a convention, at a Ren fair, it actually makes very little difference. And both fairs and conventions look at what they do and say, well, I'm just going to set aside some space for you because you're just going to entertain people for free. So it's a win-win for us. And that's how they look at it. So yeah, I get it. But I think they kind of, the fact that for the SCA, there's very little difference between conventions and Ren fairs. I think that's very telling. Mm-hmm. And okay, number 1, cosplay-themed weekends at Faire. In fact, I think I'm going to mention one here in the list in just a second. But yeah, they're like time travelers, Harry Potter-themed weekends, steampunk, we mentioned before. I mean, you get all of those themed weekends, and I mean, you're pretty much just saying, we're practically a convention, where we're just we're having our little costume contest, and just like a convention does, and it's all about time travelers. I mean, yeah, I'm still, I'll be honest, I think that's a little, I'm not crazy about that. I think that's just embracing the change and diluting the brand. I think it's going a little too far, personally. But at the same time, I can kind of see where they're coming from, because this is a revenue stream. They throw this out, they're going to get more people than they would otherwise. And people that maybe wouldn't be coming to the fair if they didn't do this. So, which is good for the fair, good for the merchants, good for performers. And I get that. I get it. But unfortunately, I think it does tend to dilute the brand of it being a Renaissance festival or a medieval festival or a time period in history, when you suddenly have a themed weekend of a completely different time period in history or not history at all. So it's like having a medieval fair with a certain king or queen in charge, and then all of a sudden you suddenly say, okay, and now we're going to have Roman weekend theme. So, okay, how does that work? It doesn't really make sense with the overall theme to me. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So yeah, totally agree there. So yeah, anyway, that's the 7 reasons that fairs and conventions are not much different. So let's jump over, because I'm already gone over 7:30. So yeah, let's jump over to the map. You'll notice most of the fairs are very north now, except for Colorado being the exception, although that's so cool no matter what time of year. But they're about to end. So yeah. But no, this is always interesting. Always interesting. Okay. Woohoo! I think we got this. Yes. Okay, we're going to start off with the fairs for this coming up weekend. We have the Maine Renaissance Fair over in Acton, Maine. And this is the last weekend, the second out of 2 weekends. Jumping down to Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Renaissance Fair in Cummington, Massachusetts. And it's only 1 weekend, so Saturday, Sunday. Jumping over to New York, we have the Sterling Renaissance Festival in Sterling, New York. This is the 5th weekend out of 7, and the theme is Highland Fling Weekend. Going over to Canada, and we have the Ontario Pirate Festival. This is in Guelph, Ontario, and this is a 3-day weekend, because Monday is a holiday in Canada. So now you know. So that'll be Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, the Ontario Pirate Festival. Jumping down to Ohio, Rock Creek, Ohio specifically, we have the Great Lakes Medieval Fair and Marketplace, the penultimate weekend, weekend 5 out of 6. The theme is Shamrocks and Shenanigans, a Celtic celebration. Now that's a good theme, but I might be biased. Going over to Bristol, the Bristol Renaissance Fair in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Halfway through, this is the 5th weekend out of 9, and their theme is, of course, Pirate Weekend, because, well, pirates. So then, going over to the North Dakota Renaissance Fair. Now, I have kind of mixed feelings about this one, because I just did the North Dakota Fair in June, and they moved from here because this fair kind of tried to take over and compete with them directly. So I kind of put it there for completeness sake, but yeah, it's their first out of 2nd weekend in West Fargo. Jumping down to Colorado, we have the Colorado Renaissance Festival in Larkspur, Colorado. This is their last weekend, and the theme is Time Travelers Weekend. There we go. And Final Huzzah. So you get that theme for conventions going in. Going over to the Cheval Court Medieval Festival in Billings, Montana, just the 1 weekend. And finishing up, we have the Washington Midsummer Renaissance Fair in Snohomish, Washington. Whew, that's a tough one to say, and don't even ask me to spell it. This is halfway through weekend 3 out of 5, and their theme is choose your alliance, villain or hero. So there you go. Woohoo! And that is what we have. Woohoo! Okay. So yeah, that is the Faire list, and I think that's all. It's already 7:40, so I guess I've done worse. But we'll call that a win. I'm gonna keep up with packing and yeah, just get everything ready to go for the convention this weekend. And yeah, the convention starts on Thursday and goes through Sunday. I may not have a show next Monday. We'll see how the timing works out. I'm not 100% sure. I'll try. I am trying hard to make those things work, but yeah, I think I'm going to end up being on the road, and I don't think I'm going to be able to. Not easily anyway. So, but if it works, I will have my stuff with me, and if I can do it, I will. So we shall see. But thank you very much for joining me and hanging out and talking a little bit about Faire and conventions this time. And yeah, let's. Hopefully, I'll see you next week, or at the very least, the week after that. And keep in mind that as the weeks and the days go on, well, life can't always be fair, but you can always have a fair life. So take care. I'll see you soon.